The encroaching twilight whispered secrets of dread as we, a cadre of truth seekers, stood at the threshold of those cursed woods. We gathered in a tight circle, the dim glow of our flashlights casting eerie shadows upon our determined faces. "Check your gear," I murmured, my voice steady despite the chill that clawed up my spine. Around me, seasoned investigators mirrored my resolve. "Remember," I said, clamping down on the unease that prowled within, "we're here for answers. Stay sharp, stay together." We stepped forward, leaving behind the last vestiges of the mundane world. The forest swallowed us whole, the crunch of dead leaves underfoot punctuating our intrusion. Twisted trees loomed like sentinels of despair, their branches skeletal fingers poised to snatch away the unwary. A heavy mist slithered between trunks, thick as the legends that shrouded this place. I took point, feeling the oppressive atmosphere clinging to my skin like cobwebs. Here, the air was a living thing, dense with the echoes of lost souls, their silent screams resonating through the shroud of time. This was no mere woodland. It was a mausoleum of nature's own making. "Did you hear that?" Evelyn's whisper shattered the silence, causing us to halt. The forest seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the breath of the unseen brushing against our cheeks. "Only the past reaching out to us," Maya replied, a note of sorrow threading her words. I signaled for us to press on, the darkness growing thicker with each step. Our lights carved a path through the gloom, but the darkness was a relentless foe, always hungering to reclaim its domain. The isolation was palpable, a living entity that sought to pry us apart and swallow us within its endless maw. Mortality hung in the air like a specter, reminding us of our fragile existence against the backdrop of an ancient evil. "Stay close," I reminded them, my own heart thrumming a funeral dirge against my ribs. And so we ventured deeper, into the very heart of horror, where humanity's light dared to challenge the enveloping void. I crouched, the cold seeping through my jeans as I brushed away a layer of damp leaves from what appeared to be an innocuous piece of wood. But beneath, nestled in the embrace of decay, lay a relic of the past. An old journal, its leather cover cracked and bloated from years of neglect. Jared shone his flashlight over my shoulder, casting the pages in stark relief against the shadows that danced just beyond our circle of light. The entries were cryptic, penned with a trembling hand that spoke of terror beyond reason. Dark tales of rituals and sacrifice sprawled across the parchment, hinting at a legacy of atrocity rooted deep within the wood's marrow. "God, what happened here?" Evelyn breathed, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it seemed to stir the very air around us. "Let's not jump to conclusions," Dr. Shelby interjected, ever the voice of clinical detachment. "These could simply be the ramblings of a disturbed mind." "Disturbed by what, though?" "That's what we need to find out," Ruby said, her gaze locked on the archaic words, as if she could will the truth to surface. "Anton, you're the historian. Ever come across anything like this in the town archives?" I asked, seeking some anchor in the sea of uncertainty. "Never," he replied, his skepticism faltering for a moment under the weight of the journal's grim testimony. The forest seemed to close in around us, the darkness tightening its grip. Then it began. A soft murmur at first, so faint I thought it might be the rustling of leaves or the scurrying of unseen creatures. But the sound swelled. A chorus of whispers carried on the wind, voices laden with anguish and despair. "Can you hear them?" Maya asked, her face pale, her usual warmth extinguished by the spectral lamentations. "Yes," I admitted, the admission catching in my throat. "They're getting louder." Stay focused, I told myself more than anyone else. We're here to find answers, not to succumb to fear. But as the whispers grew more distinct, my resolve wavered. They spoke of sorrow, of lives torn asunder and spirits shackled to an unending torment. The voices clawed at my thoughts, dredging up memories of my own losses, the faces of those I couldn't save from the dark. It was as if the forest itself were alive, its breath a symphony of pain that resonated with every fiber of my being. "Lucas, we can't let this get to us," Evelyn said, her hand finding mine in the gloom, her touch a lifeline amidst the creeping dread. "Right," I managed, squeezing her hand in silent gratitude. "Let's keep moving." The unease settled over us like a shroud. Each step forward, a defiance against the insidious whispers that sought to unravel our minds. We were trespassers here, walking a path fraught with secrets that yearned to remain buried, and the forest was all too eager to remind us of our mortality, the fragility of our existence hanging by a thread in the vast tapestry of time. But still, we pressed on, for turning back was not an option. Not when the truth lay hidden in the shadows, beckoning us deeper into its enigmatic heart. The scream shattered the solemnity of the haunted woods, a visceral intrusion upon the eerie silence that had thus far cloaked our every step. I spun towards the source, my pulse thundering in my ears, instincts honed from years of navigating the unknown, sending me hurtling through underbrush and over gnarled roots. "Over here," Jared's voice cut through the thick air, tinged with a panic that mirrored my own. We converged on the spot where he stood, frozen, his tech-laden backpack hanging askew. It was a solemn tableau. The torn fabric, crimson, stained and cruelly snagged on the vicious embrace of a thorny branch. The material was familiar, too familiar, and a cold dread settled in my gut. Ruby's jacket, the one she'd worn when we set out at dawn, now looked like a grim banner heralding an unseen horror. Ruby. Her name escaped my lips as a whisper, barely audible over the blood rushing in my head. "Lucas, look around. We're not alone," Maya murmured, her dark eyes darting between the twisted sentinels of the forest. There was a tremor in her voice, one that spoke of more than just the chill in the air. I felt it then, the sensation of being watched, scrutinized by entities hidden amongst the skeletal boughs. My skin prickled, each hair standing on end, as if charged by the electric atmosphere of predation. Glimpses of movement teased the corners of my vision, shadowy figures that flitted between the trees with an unsettling agility. "Keep close," I instructed, my voice betraying none of the trepidation that clawed at my insides, eyes sharp, everyone. Anton clutched his historical texts tighter to his chest, skepticism warring with the raw fear that shone in his eyes. Dr. Shelby, ever the analyst, scanned the environment with a furrowed brow, perhaps attempting to rationalize the irrational. And Evelyn, dear Evelyn, her fingers brushed against mine once more, a silent pact between us to face whatever lay ahead. "Something's not right," Dr. Shelby said, his clinical tone fraying at the edges. "This is psychological warfare at its finest, an assault on our senses, our minds." "Or a warning," Anton added, his voice unsteady. "Either way," I replied, "we have to find Ruby." As we trudged onward, the oppressive feeling of being observed grew only more acute. Whispers returned, but not like before. These were hushed, conspiratorial, the sibilant sounds encircling us like a noose. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves tightened that noose, a constant reminder of our vulnerability within this ancient, malevolent expanse. Felicity's warnings echoed in my memory, cryptic words about respecting the forest's power. But respect would not bring back Ruby, nor would it unveil the secrets that this place jealously guarded. So, we forged ahead, our collective resolve a flickering flame in the overwhelming darkness that sought to extinguish it. Yet, even as we searched for our missing comrade, the forest searched us, probing for weaknesses, for the chinks in our mental armor. It was a predator of a different kind, one that fed on fear and uncertainty. And in that moment, I understood that our very souls were at stake, that the fragility of human life was never so apparent as when faced with the unfathomable depths of an ancient evil. A glimmer in the periphery of my vision snagged my attention, luring me away from the group's huddled formation. The peculiar glow flickered like a beacon through the dense thicket, whispering promises of revelation. "Lucas!" I called out, my voice barely rising above the chorus of the forest's eerie murmurs. But Lucas was absorbed in scrutinizing the bloodied fabric, his face set in grim determination. He didn't hear me, or if he did, the sight before him held him captive. I should have resisted the pull of that enigmatic light, but curiosity is a siren that sings sweetly to the seeker's soul. With each step towards the source, the underbrush grew thicker, the brambles more insistent, clawing at my clothes as if warning me back. Yet onward I pressed, driven by an inexplicable compulsion. The light danced just beyond reach, an ethereal waltz that quickened my pulse. I ventured into the silence that followed its disappearance, half expecting an answer from the void. But there was none, only the echo of my own voice, which seemed to mock my solitude. It was only when the last shimmer of light extinguished, leaving me shrouded in darkness, that the weight of isolation bore down upon me. Disoriented, I turned in what I hoped was the direction of my comrades, but the forest had transformed. Every tree looked identical, every path a replica of the previous one. Panic clawed at my chest, its icy fingers far colder than the night air that began to nip at my skin. Jared? Evelyn? Anyone? My calls grew more frantic as I stumbled through the oppressive blackness. A chill settled over the woods, one that spoke not of temperature but of something far more sinister. "Over here," it was Maya's voice, her tone tinged with relief and urgency. Guided by the sound, I pushed through the final barrier of trees to find my team clustered together in a clearing where the vegetation seemed to recoil in fear, giving way to an open space. The trees around the perimeter warped grotesquely, their trunks bent inward to form a twisted archway that loomed over us like the mouth of some great beast. The air here was still, unnaturally so, as if the very breath of the forest dared not enter. "Lucas, this doesn't feel right," Evelyn whispered, her eyes wide with an ancient instinct. The recognition of prey in the presence of a predator. "Stay close," Lucas commanded, the steel in his voice belying the dread that surely gripped him too. Our gazes were drawn to the archway, and it was impossible to shake the sensation that it watched us in return, its intent malevolent and hungry. "Whatever this is, it's old," Anton murmured, his historian's fascination warring with the palpable fear that clung to him like a second skin. "Old and angry," I added, unable to shake the feeling of countless eyes upon us, unseen yet piercing. We stood on the precipice of understanding, teetering between our world and one shrouded in shadows and secrets. Here, in the heart of the haunted woods, we confronted not just the darkness outside, but also the darkness within, the doubts, the fears, the fragile threads of sanity that threatened to snap under the strain. "Let's keep moving," Lucas said after a moment, his voice firm yet not unkind. "But be vigilant. We're not alone." And so, with trepidation as our silent sentinel, we crossed the threshold of the archway, stepping deeper into the abyss that beckoned with a promise of terror and truth intertwined. The archway loomed before us, a sinister sentinel to a world best left undiscovered. My fingers brushed against the rough bark of a tree framing this ominous gateway, recoiling as if scalded when they encountered the carvings etched deep within its flesh. Symbols not born of any language known to man glowed faintly with a phosphorescent shimmer that ebbed and flowed like the chest of a slumbering beast. "Look at this!" Jared's voice cut through the thick silence, his tone hushed in reverence, or was it fear? He traced the outlines, his tech-adept hands uncharacteristically trembling. It's like they're alive. Alive, yes, but not benevolent, Maya added, her eyes dark pools reflecting the enigmatic light. She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself in a futile attempt to ward off the chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Whatever civilization crafted these, they understood something profound, something dreadful, Anton spoke, his words heavy with an academic curiosity that didn't quite mask the underlying trepidation. I could see him mentally cataloging each curve and line, even as his body language suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. The symbols seemed to pulsate more urgently now, as if our attention had stirred them from an eon's long slumber. A palpable force emanated from them, pressing against my skull like the onset of a migraine. It whispered of secrets that should remain buried, of a truth too terrible for the human mind to bear. "Let's not linger," Lucas said, breaking the spell that held us captive. "We need to find a way out of here before—" He didn't finish the sentence. As if on cue, darkness descended upon us with the swiftness of a raptor's strike, smothering the last vestiges of twilight. The forest canopy stitched together by unseen hands, snuffing out the stars and leaving us blind in an impenetrable void. "Flashlights." Evelyn's command was sharp, a clear note of panic edging her usually composed voice. I fumbled with my own, the beam flickering uncertainly before dying completely. "Damn it," Dr. Shelby cursed under his breath, his clinical demeanor fraying at the edges. "This can't be just a battery issue." "Something doesn't want us to see." Ruby's statement, simple and stark, carried the weight of conviction. Her local lore suddenly didn't seem so much like superstition. "Stay close, everyone. Hand to shoulder," Lucas ordered, trying to marshal order in the chaos. We complied, forming a chain of desperate reliance, but it did little to abate the gnawing dread that we were being led, blindfolded, to our doom. "Can anyone else feel that?" Maya's voice barely rose above a whisper, yet it rang out clear in the oppressive blackness. "It's like we're being herded." "Herded," Jared echoed, trying to inject some levity into the situation. No one laughed. "Whatever walks in these woods," I began, my throat tightening around the words, "it's ancient, cunning, and it knows this land better than we ever will." "Focus on moving forward," Lucas urged, the leader in him battling against the same fear that clawed at all of us. But forward to where? Every step felt like a descent further into purgatory, a place where shadows reigned supreme and mankind's dominion over the earth was but a child's fairy tale. The sensation of unseen watchers grew more intense, the certainty that eyes gleamed in the darkness, observing, waiting. Our progression was slow, hindered by roots that seemed to writhe beneath our feet and branches that grasped like the hands of the damned. With each faltering step, we knew that we were not merely investigators of the unknown, but potential victims of an ancient malevolence that hungered for more than just our sanity. The air grew thick with a primordial cold as we inched forward, our breaths hanging before us like spectral apparitions. The darkness was no longer merely the absence of light. It was an entity unto itself, oppressive and unyielding. I could hear the blood pulsing through my veins, a rhythmic counterpoint to the muffled footfalls of my companions. We were ensnared in a world where the very concept of time seemed twisted, distorted. A sudden guttural cry shattered the stillness, wrenching a startled gasp from Evelyn's lips beside me. It emanated from everywhere and nowhere, a wail that spoke of anguish older than the woods themselves. In that moment, our quest for knowledge, our scientific detachment, evaporated like mist in the face of raw, existential terror. "Form up," Lucas barked, his voice quivering despite his attempt at command. "Back to back, keep your eyes peeled." As we huddled close, the shadows began to undulate. congealing into a form too grotesque to belong to any known creature. It was as if the darkness had coalesced into sinew and bone, an amalgam of every fear that ever plagued the human heart. The entity shifted, its silhouette morphing with each blink of my eyes, now a towering behemoth, now a writhing mass close to the ground. It shrieked again, a sound that clawed at the edges of sanity, and I felt Maya's hand grip mine with a strength born of desperation. "It's not of this world," she whispered, her voice tinged with a knowledge beyond her years. "It's something else, something older." Then they descended upon us, the entity and its legion of shadows. Our flashlights, once thought to be feeble shields against the encroaching dark, flickered back to life. Each beam became a lance, thrusting out into the abyss, yet they did nothing to halt the advance of the malevolent force. Ruby screamed as shadowy tendrils enveloped her, dragging her into the void beyond the reach of our lights. Her cries cut short with chilling abruptness, leaving only the echoes to remind us she had ever been there. "Run!" Dr. Shelby shouted, the analyst in him crumbling under the undeniable proof of something beyond explanation. But where could we run? The forest was a labyrinth designed by madness. Anton was next, his skepticism silenced forever as he was lifted into the air, his body contorting in impossible ways before being consumed by the entity's insatiable hunger. His last words, a string of prayers and curses, faded into the night. We scattered, a flock of mortals against the inexorable tide of darkness. Jared stumbled, his glasses lost the forest floor, and with them his chance of escape. He laughed, a hollow sound, as he accepted his fate, the shadows claiming him with swift, merciless efficiency. I heard Evelyn's breathing, ragged and frantic, somewhere to my right. "Lucas?" she called, her voice tinged with both fear and determination. There was no response. Had he fallen too? Or was he out there, searching for us as blindly as we searched for him? Maya's grip on my hand never wavered as we ran. But even the medium's connection to the other side could not save her. A force struck her from behind, a blow that sent her tumbling away from me. Her eyes met mine one last time, filled with sorrow, before the darkness swallowed her whole. Isolation gnawed at me as I ran, the realization that I was alone, truly alone. The forest was alive with the sounds of the entity's rage, a symphony of horror that promised a gruesome end. My breath came in ragged sobs, each step a futile gesture against the inevitable. In the end, it was not the darkness that claimed me, nor the entity's wrath. It was the simple, brutal truth of mortality. My body giving way beneath the strain, my heart seizing within my chest. As I collapsed, the ground rushing up to meet me, I pondered the fragility of our existence, how easily life is extinguished, snuffed out like a candle in the all-consuming void. The forest closed in around me, and I understood at last. We were never hunters in these haunted woods. We were prey, and the darkness was always going to have its due. The deeper we ventured into the shifting forest, the more it felt like the world was closing in on us. The undergrowth clawed at my boots, and the air was thick with the musk of decay. Every rustle of leaves carried a whisper that wasn't quite human, wasn't quite natural. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was listening, responding to our every step with a hushed giggle or a sibilant sigh. "Keep your eyes on the map," I murmured, my voice barely louder than the forest's incessant murmur. The maps were a joke, ink blots and scribbles that looked more like children's nightmares than any real guidance. But they were all we had, besides the tall tales of locals who spoke of the forest as if it were alive, which I had begun to suspect it very well might be. Pushing through a particularly stubborn bramble, I paused to extricate a thorn from my palm, the blood welling up darker than it should have been in the gloom. My companions' faces were gaunt in the dim light, their eyes wide and darting. We all knew the stories. We all thought we'd be the ones to come out the other side with answers, or at least with our skins intact. "Left here," I instructed tersely, pointing towards what looked like a less dense patch of vegetation. I could feel the skepticism radiating off the others, but no one argued. Not out loud, anyway. Their silence was its own form of dissent, heavy and judgmental. I led the way, each footfall deliberate, avoiding the deceptive softness of moss that could mean a hidden pit or worse. This place played tricks on the mind, made you see things that weren't there, or perhaps more accurately, things you didn't want to be there. I had long since learned to doubt my own senses. The only thing I trusted now was the gnawing unease in my gut. "Are we even making progress?" came a hushed, anxious query from behind me. "Does it matter?" That was my response, flat and humorless. Progress implied a destination, an end to this madness. But the shifting forest had no end. It was an eternal, malevolent loop, intent on ensnaring us in its thicket-laden arms until time itself withered away. And so we trudged on, guided by the enigmatic whispers of the forest and the cryptic clues of madmen, each step taking us further into the heart of darkness that throbbed beneath the canopy. Each breath we took was borrowed from the forest itself, and I couldn't help but wonder what it would cost us in the end. The forest relented, the trees parting as if on cue to reveal an unsettling tableau, a clearing, sudden and stark against the oppressive density we'd been fighting through for days. Here, the shifting forest showed its hand. The trees, they weren't just trees. They were contortionists of wood and leaf, their trunks warped into grotesque shapes, branches unfurling like the desiccated fingers of a cadaver reaching skyward in a silent plea. "Would you look at that?" Alex's voice was a mix of wonder and unease, the sound cutting through the stillness as she stepped beside me. I didn't reply, my eyes scanning the natural aberration before us. This was what we were here for, to understand, to explain, maybe even to control. But the truth clawed at the back of my mind. Some things weren't meant to be understood. "Dr. Hawthorne, your thoughts?" Alex nudged, her expression unreadable beneath the mask of professionalism. "Remarkable," I managed, but my tone betrayed my detachment. A textbook example of environmental anomaly. Or nature's twisted art show. She smirked, trying to lighten the mood, but the air was too thick with the scent of decay for humor. "Let's get samples," I suggested, already moving towards the nearest monstrosity of a tree, eager to peel back its secrets layer by layer. My hands were steady, clinical, as I scraped bark and collected leaves, each specimen a potential key to unlocking the riddle of this place. Alex watched, her gaze sharp, the compass dangling from her neck forgotten for a moment. "You're not just here for the science, are you, John?" Her question was pointed, a verbal scalpel peeling away at layers I kept hidden. "Science is all there is," I replied curtly, my focus unwavering as I bagged another sample. "The rest is just noise." "Must be pretty loud noise to bring you out here." Her words hung between us, an unspoken acknowledgement of the burdens we carried into this unholy silence. I didn't dignify her insight with a response, letting my actions speak instead. The forest watched, its whispers growing louder as if mocking our feeble attempts to comprehend its essence. My heart beat a rhythm in tune with the ancient pulse of the land, a dark symphony accompanied by the creaking of the twisting trees. "Let's keep moving," I said at last, sealing the last vial. The path ahead was uncertain, the certainty of doubt our only guide. Moving. "The forest seems to have mastered that trick without us," I quipped, eyeing a particularly gnarled oak that seemed to twist upon itself like a sinner in purgatory. "Well, it hasn't mastered the art of witty banter now, has it?" Alex shot back, her machete slicing through the underbrush with efficient grace, or sarcasm for that matter. Trees are notoriously poor conversationalists, I deadpanned, stepping over a root that wasn't there a moment ago. The grotesque ballet of vegetation had become the norm since we entered this place. Yet, here you are, trying to engage them in deep, meaningful dialogue. She smirked, and the forest swallowed the sound of our laughter, a greedy silence descending once more. I pushed forward as a vine curled a little too close for comfort, its thorny appendage brushing against my boot. The ground beneath us was soft, each step a reminder of how foreign this land was, or perhaps how foreign we were to it. "Ever feel like you're walking in circles, John?" Alex asked, her tone tinged with unease. "Only when revisiting past mistakes," I murmured, the weight of those words sinking me deeper into the mire of my own mind. A memory flashed. A pair of bright green eyes, laughter like a clear morning in spring, gone. The image cut at me, sharper than any blade. Her smile had been my beacon, my northern star, and I had extinguished it. The science, my quest, it was penance, not passion, payment owed to a ghost. "John," Alex's voice yanked me from the clutches of my reverie. "Sorry, just." Remembering what circles look like, I said, feeling the scar tissue of old wounds tighten across my chest. The truth lay buried, an unmarked grave, in the wilderness of my heart. "Let's hope your sense of direction is better than your attempts at humor," she retorted, but the concern in her eyes betrayed her jest. "Hope," I scoffed quietly, "is for those who haven't walked these woods." Thorns snagged at my sleeves, a reminder that every step here was a fight, a battle against the forest's grip. I pushed forward, my eyes scanning the cryptic terrain, searching for the patterns in the chaos. The trees loomed, their branches knotted like arthritic fingers clawing at the dying light. "Watch your," Alex started, but her warning dissolved into a gasp. I turned, following her gaze. There it stood in the clearing, an aberration born from the twisted bowels of the forest. Its limbs were elongated to grotesque proportions, bark, skin warped and weeping sap like blood. The creature's face, if you could call it that, was a contorted mask of roots and leaves, hollows where eyes should have been, staring into the void, or perhaps directly into me. "Jesus," I whispered, my pulse hammering a frantic rhythm against my temples. Its features morphed, reflecting the very image of my deepest regret. The green eyes I'd lost, now sunken pits of despair on its visage. "John," Alex's voice trembled barely above a murmur. "What is that?" "Nightmare fuel," I muttered, my words laced with a cynicism that couldn't mask the dread curling in my gut. My breath hitched, catching in my throat as the creature advanced, each movement a grotesque pantomime of human agony. "Back away slowly," I instructed, though my own legs felt rooted to the soil. Every fiber of my being screamed to flee, to escape the monstrous reflection of my insecurities made flesh. It was as if the forest had plucked the darkness from within me and set it loose to haunt my waking moments. "Is it looking at you?" Alex's question was a whisper, her presence a distant anchor in the tide of fear threatening to pull me under. "Feels like it," I replied, my voice a strained rasp. The air grew thick, charged with an electric tension as the creature swayed, its limbs creaking like the timbers of a rotting ship. "John, we need to move." Alex's command cut through the fog of terror encasing my mind. "Right," I agreed, forcing my leaden feet to obey. With each step, I felt its gaze bore into me, a silent accusation, a reminder of the sin I carried. "Keep going," I urged, my tone flat, as if I could deny the horror behind us with sheer willpower. But the image of the creature lingered, imprinted on my retinas, a grotesque specter crafted from guilt and sorrow, hunting me through the shifting shadows of the forest. We navigated back to camp in silence, the grotesque afterimage of the creature seething in my mind's eye. The others awaited us, their faces expectant, a ring of headlamps piercing the gloom of the forest. "John," Sarah's voice broke the stillness, paleontologist, sharp as flint. "What happened out there?" "Ran into a local," I said, the words tasting like ash on my tongue. "Local fauna?" she prodded, skeptical. "Hardly." I swallowed hard, the memory fresh and biting. Something else. "Details," John pressed Michael, our anthropologist. His curiosity always ran deep. Now it was tinged with concern. I recalled the encounter, sparing no detail, watching their faces shift from intrigue to disbelief. My heart thudded, each beat a hammer against the walls I built around my fear. "Impossible," Sarah murmured, shaking her head. Her gaze darted to the trees, once curious, now wary. "Is this some kind of joke?" Michael's brow furrowed. He searched my face for a sign of deceit. "No joke," I replied. My voice felt hollow, distant even to my own ears. "Could be stress," Alex suggested gently. She knew the terrain, the way it could play tricks on your mind. "Or guilt," I added silently, the unspoken word heavy on my chest. "Are we safe here?" That was Hannah, our linguist, always measured. Now her words quivered with barely concealed panic. "Safe as we can be," I lied. The lie was a stone in my throat. "Should we leave?" Sarah's question hung in the air, an invitation to chaos. "Can't," I countered. "Not until we find what we came for." "Even if it finds us first," Michael's retort was sharp, cutting. "Enough," Alex snapped, authority clear in her tone. "We stick to the plan." Doubt seeded itself in their expressions, a garden of suspicion taking root. Their glances became sidelong, trust eroding with the passing seconds. "Sleep," I commanded, more to myself than to them. "We need sleep." "Right." Sarah's agreement was automatic, robotic. We retreated to our tents, the fabric barriers laughably inadequate against the darkness outside and within. In the tense claustrophobic embrace, I lay still, listening to the forest breathe around us, a sinister susurration that seemed almost mocking. "Sleep," I told myself again, but the shadows behind my eyelids danced with twisted limbs and accusatory stares. The sin I bore was a beacon calling forth horrors rooted in regret, drawing them ever closer with each labored breath. I stepped out, the tent flap falling shut behind me. The darkness clung to my skin, almost tangible in its weight. I'd come to this place to unearth its secrets, not to be devoured by them. But here I stood, on the precipice of madness, the forest's twisted visage, a reflection of my own inner turmoil. "Face it," I muttered, my breath forming ghosts in the cold night air. A rustling sound, leaves or laughter, I couldn't tell, ants just beyond the range of my vision. My heart hammered each beat a drum of war against the creeping dread. I marched towards the clearing where the trees contorted into grotesque parodies of life. "Come on then," I called out, my voice harsh, defiant. I needed to confront it, the embodiment of my fear, my guilt. The forest loomed, and from the depths emerged the creature, an abomination with limbs too long, a face too warped. It was the specter of my past mistakes given form, each twisted limb a sin I had committed. "Is that all you've got?" I sneered at the thing, though my hands trembled, betraying me. I took a step forward, another, until I was close enough to see the malice in its hollow eyes. "John," the creature's voice was mine but distorted, as if dragged through thorns and mud. "Shut up," I hissed, closing the distance. I reached out, fingers itching to rip apart the nightmare before me. John, stop. It was Alex's voice now, laced with urgency, coming from somewhere far away. But I couldn't heed her call. The forest demanded my attention. "Face me," I roared, and the creature lunged. We grappled, flesh against shadow, reality bending around us. Twigs snapped beneath us. But as I fought, the creature's features began to blur, and my own face stared back at me, contorted in grief and rage. Panic surged, thick and suffocating. John, it's in your head," Alex again, her words like anchors trying to hold me to sanity. "Can't be," I gasped, the fight draining out of me. The creature vanished, leaving me clutching at the empty air, lungs heaving. "Help him." The words were distant thunder. Sarah or Michael, maybe both. "Get off me," I spat as they hauled me back to camp. Their touches were fire on my skin. I stumbled, legs uncooperative, mind reeling. "John, look at me," Alex commanded, a lifeline amidst the chaos. Her eyes searched mine, a storm of concern within them. But trust. Could there still be trust after what they'd seen? "Can't stay here," I murmured, more to myself than to them. The forest's malevolence was a tide, relentless, eroding the edges of my reason. "Sleep, John." Hannah's voice was a soft plea, but sleep was a country whose borders I could no longer reach. "Sleep won't come," I croaked. "Not here, not in this place." "Then we keep watch," Alex said firmly. "Together." Their silhouettes hovered, fractured by doubt. No sleep, only vigilance, punctuated by the erratic symphony of an ancient, shifting wilderness. "Stay alert," I managed, my voice empty of conviction. "Always," came the terse reply, but it was spoken to shadows, to the unseen eyes that watched from the dark. "Always," echoed the whispering leaves, a promise or a threat. The line between them blurred as the shifting forest continued its insidious dance, warping the world around us, leaving us adrift in a sea of fear and suspicion. The keys lay dormant beneath my fingertips, a silent audience to the stillness that enveloped the cabin. I was alone, or so the empty room would have others believe. But the whispers, they were ever present, a ceaseless murmuration that seeped through the cracks of my solitude, staining the air with an otherworldly cadence. "Write," they urged, a sibilant chorus at the edge of hearing. "Let our stories flow through you." I succumbed, time and again, to their haunting lilt. The forests outside, once a source of serene inspiration, now spun a tapestry of dark fantasies in my mind. Shadows took sinister shapes, and every rustle of leaves became the hushed dialogue of unseen entities. The natural world had transformed into an extension of the whispers, its every element a thread in the macabre narrative they wove. Once, I believed I could separate the silence from the sound, the real from the imagined. But as days melded into nights, the distinction blurred. The whispers did not just break the silence. They became it, a constant companion, an intimate confidant that knew no boundaries, respected no sanctity of thought. With each passing moment, the obsession grew. It clawed its way into my consciousness, demanding attention like a ravenous beast. The whispers painted vivid scenes of despair and horror, visions that danced behind my eyelids and taunted me with their persistence. I could no longer focus on the manuscript that lay before me, its pages as blank as my will to continue the charade of normalcy. My once cherished isolation turned against me, a self-imposed exile that fed the whisper's strength. They thrived in the absence of human touch, in the void where laughter and love used to reside. The perfectionist in me, which sought control over the written word, faltered against their relentless siege. "Tell our tale," the voices insisted, winding tighter around the core of my being. unveil the truth hidden within the gnarled roots and twisted boughs. I heeded their siren call, my purpose no longer to create, but to uncover, to excavate the secrets buried beneath layers of earth and enigma. With each stroke of the key, I delved deeper, my soul intertwining with the very essence of the forest's whispered lore. Dread settled upon me, a tangible shroud woven from the threads of my own unraveling sanity. Yet I could not, would not, tear myself away. The whispers promised revelation, a glimpse into the abyss that yawned just beyond the veneer of reality. I stepped beyond the threshold of my cabin, the whispers clinging to me like a second skin. The forest greeted me with an unsettling familiarity, as if it had been expecting me all along. The soles of my boots sank into the soft loam, each footfall muffled by the carpet of pine needles strewn across the path. Deeper, the voices urged, a chorus of ghostly murmurs that I could neither ignore nor fully comprehend. The trees, my silent sentinels, stood watch with gnarled limbs that twitched and swayed in a grotesque ballet. No wind stirred their boughs, yet they moved, animated by some unseen force, echoing the sinister tales that had taken root in my mind. Eyes darting from shadow to shadow, I struggled to separate the rustling of leaves from the sibilant whispers that seemed to slither through the underbrush. Every snapped twig, every scurrying creature, set my heart racing, a prisoner within my own ribcage. The paranoia was palpable, a creeping vine that entwined itself around my thoughts, squeezing until reason gasped for breath. As I ventured deeper, the atmosphere thickened, a shroud of darkness that the afternoon sun fought to penetrate but could not conquer. An inexplicable chill caressed my skin, raising goosebumps in its wake. The deeper I went, the colder it grew, as if the forest itself were exhaling a frosty breath upon me. Look closer, the whispers coaxed, more insistent now, and there, in the muted light, subtle oddities began to reveal themselves. A series of markings etched into the bark of an ancient oak caught my gaze, symbols that dared me to decipher their arcane language. Each step I took seemed to unearth another clue, a breadcrumb trail left by the unseen denizens of this wilderness. A hollow in the trunk of a fallen tree beckoned, dark and foreboding, yet irresistibly intriguing. Within, I discerned the remnants of something once cherished, now abandoned. A locket, perhaps, or a cryptic note ravaged by time and neglect. With each revelation, the sense of impending doom burrowed deeper into my soul. Shadows stretched long fingers toward me, as if to snatch at my sanity and drag it into the depths of night. The boundary between what lay before my eyes and what skulked in the corners of my mind blurred, leaving me adrift in a sea of doubt and dread. I returned to the cabin, its walls closing in like a crypt as the last light of day bled from the sky. The whispers had followed me, slithering across the floorboards, curling around the spines of dust-laden books that held the cryptic knowledge of ages past. I sat at my desk, a solitary figure shackled by an obsession that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. The glow of the lamp cast long shadows upon the pages before me, where words once full of promise now seemed to mock me with their inscrutability. My mind wavered on the precipice of understanding, teetering between revelations and the abyss of madness. Sleep had become a stranger, elusive and unwelcome, for it brought dreams woven from the same fabric as the whispering woods, a tapestry of terror and enticement. Each night, my hands trembled as they leafed through ancient manuscripts, the parchment crackling like dry leaves underfoot. Mythologies and histories melded into one another, a labyrinthine maze with no discernible end. What was once passion for my craft had decayed into a haunting, leaving me haggard, eyes hollow, from the relentless pursuit of truths that might never surface. Help me, I begged of the silent authors, long since crumbled to dust. Yet their secrets remained ensconced within the faded ink, as cryptic as the forest's call. In the margins, I scribbled frantic notes, stories born of desperation. As the hours waned, the line between waking life and nightmare frayed, each strand unraveling to reveal glimpses of a hidden world. Was I the writer seeking solitude for his art, or merely a pawn in a story written by unseen hands? The darkness pressed in, suffocating, an eternal void where only the whispers filled the void with their siren song. And so I obeyed, driven by a force beyond my own volition, scouring texts until my vision blurred. Each syllable was a siren's call, luring me to shipwreck upon the shores of insanity. The cabin groaned as if burdened by the weight of my descent. The world outside the window reduced to an indistinct haze. I could no longer discern if the chill that wrapped around my bones was born of the cold or the creeping dread that claimed me as its own. In the grip of the forest's haunting embrace, I penned my fears, my discoveries, my spiraling thoughts. They spilled onto the pages in a torrent of ink, black as the night that swallowed me whole. I clung to the hope that within these writings lay the salvation from whispers, or perhaps the final testament of a man lost to the darkness. I stepped into the forest, the whispers swarming my senses like a cloud of unseen locusts. They had grown louder, more insistent, as if every shadow harbored a mouth, every rustle of leaves a tongue eager to articulate ominous secrets. They called to me, stretching my name into an endless echo that entwined with the wind's mournful howl. The trees, tall, gnarled sentinels of the ancient wood, seemed to bend toward me, their branches clawing at the sky, then reaching for me as if to drag me into their dark wooden embrace. I could almost feel the brush of bark against my skin, the cold caress of leaves whispering promises of enlightenment and madness intertwined. It was a dance choreographed by an unseen puppeteer who delighted in my torment. Every step forward felt like sinking deeper into quicksand. My heart pounded a staccato rhythm against my ribs, a desperate drumbeat beneath the cacophony of voices, each beat a futile plea for clarity. The once familiar paths were now labyrinths, the underbrush, an adversary that grasped at my ankles, urging me to stumble, to fall, to succumb. My isolation here became more than a choice. It was a sentence, one I had imposed upon myself in a quest for literary perfection. But now, the very solitude I sought was my jailer, tightening its grip around my psyche, feeding my paranoia with every whispering leaf and shadowed corner. I stepped deeper into the forest's embrace, the underbrush thickening with each step, clawing at my boots like desperate hands from the earth. Sunlight barely pierced the dense canopy above, casting fractured patterns that danced eerily upon the ground. My breaths came in short gasps, visible in the chill air that wrapped itself around me like a shroud. The whispers guided me, a dissonant chorus only I could discern, urging me onward to the heart of this enigmatic wilderness. With every stride, the boundary between their murmurs and my own thoughts grew hazier, as if my consciousness were not entirely my own, but a vessel for their ancient lament. An abrupt silence fell upon the woods, and I stumbled upon a clearing where time seemed to have stilled. The trees here bore the scars of antiquity, not merely the weathered grooves of age, but deliberate marks, symbols etched deep into their bark. They spiraled into intricate patterns, arcane and indecipherable, yet they spoke of a somber tale long since buried beneath layers of moss and secrecy. My fingertips traced the contours of the carvings, and a cold realization settled in my chest. These were not mere markings, but epitaphs, a silent testament to some forgotten tragedy that the forest refused to release from its memory. A shiver coursed down my spine, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that I was trespassing upon hallowed ground, a place steeped in sorrow that the living were not meant to disturb. Compelled by an insatiable need to unearth the truth hidden within these symbols, I pressed on, the whispers now a cacophony in my mind. They chided and cajoled, weaving tales of despair and darkness that had befallen this sylvan tomb. The distinction between reality and the phantasms conjured by the forest grew indistinct, and I feared that my very sanity hung by a thread, frayed and ready to snap at the slightest provocation. As twilight approached, the shadows grew bold, elongating into grasping fingers intent on pulling me further into the abyss. The whispers crescendoed to a maddening pitch. It was no longer clear whether they emerged from the depths of the woods or the recesses of my own unraveling psyche. Vulnerable to the spectral machinations of this place, I wandered without direction, driven only by the echoes of a truth that promised liberation yet threatened to engulf me whole. Exhaustion clawed at my limbs, each step a Herculean effort as I trudged through the underbrush. The forest, once a sanctuary for my solitude, now suffocated me with its oppressive silence. My hands trembled, betraying the toll of countless sleepless nights spent chasing the whispers that promised truth, yet delivered only torment. I paused, leaning against a gnarled oak, its bark rough against my palm. In the reflection of a stagnant pool, I caught sight of my own countenance, a haggard visage staring back, with sunken eyes rimmed with the pallor of fatigue. My beard, once meticulously groomed, now grew wild and unkempt. How long had it been since I'd seen myself? How many days, or had it been weeks, since I last recognized the man in the mirror? The whispers were relentless, a litany of secrets and sins that seemed to seep from the very soil beneath my feet. I could no longer tell where their voices ended and my thoughts began. The boundary between us had eroded like the bank of a river after a storm. They spoke of mortality, of the inexorable march toward oblivion that all creatures must undertake. Their words were a dirge for the forgotten, a requiem for the lost souls that lingered in this woodland mausoleum. Pushing forward, I stumbled into a clearing enshrouded by the encroaching night. The trees formed a silent vigil around this secret hollow, their branches interlacing above to create a dome of darkness. A chill crept along my spine as I sensed the significance of this place. A clearing untouched by sunlight, where the air itself felt laden with portent. An indefinable dread settled over me, heavy as the earth that blanketed the unseen dead. The whispers crescendoed to a fever pitch, a cacophony that seemed both a warning and an invitation. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a drum roll that echoed the finality of my journey. As I stood there, on the precipice of revelation, the ground beneath me seemed to pulse with an ancient heartbeat. The shadows writhed, and in the dimming light I discerned shapes. No, not shapes, but sigils, similar to those etched upon the trees, now carved into the very earth at my feet. A story written in darkness, waiting to be read by one desperate enough to listen. I knelt, my fingers tracing the cold grooves, and as I did, the forest held its breath. The whispers fell silent, replaced by a singular resonant tone that vibrated through the clearing. The sensation of being watched grew unbearable, and I knew that I was not alone in my discovery. "Show yourself," I demanded, my voice sounding foreign even to my own ears, frayed, desperate. But the answer that came was not a voice, nor a sign. It was a presence, an overwhelming force that filled the space like a tide rushing in to claim the shore. And then, without warning, the ground gave way beneath me, as though the earth itself had decided to swallow me whole. I plunged into the darkness below, my cries swallowed by the yawning maw of the secret the forest had kept hidden until now. As I fell, the last vestiges of daylight vanished, leaving me suspended in a void where time and terror converged. The chapter closed with my descent into the unknown, the truth I so sought now rushing up to meet me in the heart of the forest's enigmatic depths.